Hi there, welcome back to our Parent Caregiver webinar series, Before It Becomes More. I'm Corey Hammond from Partnership to End Addiction. Today we're going to be talking about the new landscape of nicotine and marijuana products. Here's what I'm going to cover in this video. First, I'm going to cover nicotine and new nicotine products, how many young people are using them, and what the trends are. We will also discuss why we should be concerned about youth nicotine use and what the harms of it are. Then we're going to discuss marijuana, also called cannabis. We will discuss some of the new marijuana products on the market, prevalence and trends, and why we should be so concerned about marijuana use. Then finally, I'll share how we can keep young people safe and some resources from Partnership to End Addiction, as well as local resources. So let's get into it. Let's start with nicotine products, vapes and oral products like the new nicotine pouches. We won't spend a ton of time in this session discussing cigarettes, mostly because we've had a lot of public health success in decreasing the usage of cigarettes among youth. As you can see from this graph here, back in the 90s, more than half of 8th, 10th, and 12th graders had smoked cigarettes before. As of 2024, that was down to less than 10%. So that's a great win. But unfortunately, in response to the decreasing popularity of cigarettes, the tobacco industry decided it needed to innovate. So then e-cigarettes and vapes came on the scene, and unfortunately our fight against tobacco has changed. So let's cover the basics. What is vaping? Vaping is the act of inhaling and exhaling the aerosol, often referred to as the vapor, produced by an e-cigarette or a similar device. The diagram here on the right labels different parts of a vape. So there's a cartridge that holds the e-liquid, an atomizer, which is the heating element, a battery that may or may not be rechargeable depending on the type of vape device, and finally the mouthpiece where someone would inhale from. We're mostly going to be talking about nicotine vapes today, but e-liquid can be nicotine, marijuana, THC oil, or essential oil based. So back in 2007, the first vaping devices came on the market. These were called ciga-likes, and they were meant to closely resemble cigarettes. A few years later, modifiable vaping devices emerged, where users could buy mods and tanks and customize their own device with refillable e-liquid components. Then in 2015, pod-based products like Juul became popular. These looked like USB flash drives and could be charged by your computer or in an outlet. The pods were disposable and came in many flavors like mango and mint. After the rise of Juul, disposables became the most popular, where the entire device is disposable, not just the pod. And in the last few years, we've seen new smart vape devices with added tech capabilities. We'll talk about those more in a moment. At the peak of the vaping epidemic, which was before COVID, Juul was the most popular brand of those pod-based devices. Once the popularity of Juul began to wane, primarily because of a crackdown by the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, on those flavored pods and cartridge types like Juul, the tobacco industry quickly filled in the gap with disposable vaping products that were not nearly as tightly regulated. Those are the ones that come in a lot of different flavors, and they have cool designs and colors that appeal to youth, much like Juul did. These are not very expensive, and because they're disposable, they're easy to just throw away if you're a teen who's worried about getting caught. In 2024, these disposables became the most popular devices. 55.6% of teens who vaped were using disposables, with just over 15% using those pod-based devices. So popular brands today include things like Elf bars, Galaxy bars, Breeze, Views, and more. And even though disposables are definitely the most popular today, Juul is still around. And so the current vaping devices are sleek and appealing. They're commonly very colorful with kind of a high-tech appearance. They often resemble iPhones or pens or highlighters or flash drives. They're easy to hide, they're easy to discard, and they come in a broad range of flavors. 88% of students who vape say that they're using a flavored product. The majority are using fruit flavors, but then most popular is mint or menthol, and then just over a third are using the sweeter kind of candy-like flavors. And so e-cigarettes are trending stronger and cheaper. From 2020 to 2024, total nicotine sold increased by almost 250%. And so that increase is driven by these larger capacity, higher strength devices. Disposable e-cigarette sales increased by over 200% in that time, with growth concentrated in those flavors, so the fruit and candy and dessert flavors. In 2024, 93% of over 7,000 e-cigarette products available on the market were these disposable type devices. And most of them are on the market illegally. Only 4 disposable e-cigarette products are authorized for retail. Enforcement is having a difficult time keeping up, though, and so that's why you see them in stores, even though they're technically illegally on the market. The smart vapes are the new thing on the market, unfortunately. These are high-tech vapes that are very appealing to young people. They're called smart vapes because they feature digital screens. They sometimes have games and animations, sounds. Some of them have Bluetooth capability so they can connect to your phone, so you can check your texts on your vaping device. And it turns nicotine use into a game. Some of them have puff trackers where you can count how many times you use it in a day, and it'll show you a leaderboard comparing your stats to others to see who gets the most puffs. It's really capitalizing on youth digital dependency. Teens want to be on their phones, they want to be on tech devices, and this vaping product is really playing into that. And it makes it even tougher to stop. If your vape is connected to your phone, every time you pick up your phone, you're going to want to pick up your vape. 1/3 of adolescents and young adults who are currently e-cigarette users report that they've used a smart vape in the past 30 days. So these are gaining in popularity. Also gaining in popularity are synthetic nicotine oral products. So these are becoming increasingly popular among youth. These are not the prescribed therapies for smoking cessation. So things like Nicorette gum, Nicorette lozenges, Nicorette pouches, those are not what these are. These come in a wide range of flavors and candy-like packaging. And this came from as government restriction on tobacco products was increasing, the tobacco industry again wanted to work around some of those loopholes. So one of the major ways is by creating these oral nicotine products, and they use synthetic nicotine. It's made in a lab. It's not made from the tobacco plant. And so since the nicotine technically doesn't come from the tobacco plant, the regulators governing the manufacture and sale and marketing of these products, because those apply only to tobacco, they don't apply to these products. These are being heavily marketed on social media to kids through popular influencers. They often will make health claims because they'll say that they're tobacco-free because they use that synthetic nicotine. They're really high in nicotine content, and they can be used very discreetly, which is how teens are getting them. And so these nicotine pouches, in particular, is a modern twist on nicotine consumption. It's smokeless, it's spitless, and it's tobacco-free. Some people may remember with older, kind of more traditional smokeless tobacco, it was called dip. The user needed to spit out that really gross brown liquid, which was part of what made it unappealing to youth. It was really hard to hide that. With Zyn and some of these other nicotine pouches, you don't have to do that. Swallowing the saliva can irritate your throat a little bit, but it's designed to minimize saliva production compared to the older versions of this. So these are small microfiber pouches that contain nicotine, flavorings, and sweeteners. It's placed between the lips and the gums, and you absorb nicotine through your gums. The signs of this could be kind of a bulge under the lip. It can lead to staining of the teeth or potentially root and tooth and gum problems. But these are becoming a lot more popular. The past year prevalence of high school seniors using nicotine pouches doubled last year compared to 2023. 3.5% of 12th graders said that they used them in the past month, which is what we would consider current use. Here's the prevalence of past 30-day vaping over the past few years. So the cluster of bars on the left is middle schoolers, and the cluster of bars on the right is high schoolers. As you can see, nicotine vaping peaked for both middle and high schoolers in 2019. That's the bars second from the left. And then has decreased since then. But still in 2024, almost 8% of high schoolers said that they vaped in the past month. And interestingly, tobacco companies will say that their intended audience is adults, but consistently, adults vape at lower rates than young people. In 2021, for instance, only about 4.5% of adults said that they were currently vaping, but over 11% of high school students were. So, for an industry that's trying to make as much money as possible, do you think they would actively take steps to turn away their main demographic? I'll let you answer that. And teens are not just experimenting with vaping devices. Many are using it really frequently, which is defined here as 20 or more days in the past month. National data from 2024 shows that more than 40% of high school students and over a quarter of middle school students who vaped in the past 30 days did so at least 20 days a month. And among those who vaped in the past 30 days, about 16% of high school students and 30% of about 16% of middle school students and about 30% of high school students said that they did so daily, every day. For middle school students, these numbers are higher than last year, but for high school students, they're about the same. And so many adults wonder how kids who are underage are getting access to vaping products. This is data from a survey of young people from 2021. Of kids who vaped in the past month, how did they get access to that vaping product? Respondents of this survey could pick more than one way, so the percentages don't add up totally to 100. But younger teens, age 13 to 17, are the darker bars, and 18 to 20-year-olds are the orange bars on the right side. But you can see younger teens are more likely to get vapes from people they know, and those 18 to 20 are more likely to get them from a retail store, even if it's still illegal for those 18 to 20 to buy them at a retail store. So why are we so concerned about youth vaping and nicotine use? Today, many of us are well versed on the dangers of cigarette smoking. We know that cigarette smoke contains over 7,000 chemicals, including several that are known to cause cancer. When vapes came into the picture, many people believed that they were harmless, that it was just inhaling and exhaling water vapor. Unfortunately, we now know that that's not true. E-cigarette aerosol contains nicotine, but also ultrafine chemicals, flavors, volatile organic compounds, and heavy metals, all of which can be damaging to health. There's also an increased risk with specific vaping devices that have a large amount of e-liquid, these high puff vapes. Unfortunately, most vapes on the market today are considered high puff vapes. So these large devices are meant to deliver thousands of puffs before running out, and they may become more toxic the longer that they're used. And so why this happens is because the e-liquid is being heated and then cooled, and heated and then cooled thousands of times. And so aldehydes build up in that e-liquid as it's repeatedly heated. And so aldehydes are things like formaldehyde, which you may have heard of. It's a known cancer-causing ingredient. And so these cause significant damage to lung cells and can lead to cancer. The screenshot at the bottom here is the study, the recent study that first highlighted this kind of new harm. And so the emergence of these high puff vapes comes from this nicotine arms race. Companies are working to pack as much addictive nicotine into their products as possible. Juul pods varied in their nicotine concentration, but for many of them, you could consider one Juul pod to have as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. The typical disposable these days has the nicotine equivalent of over 100 cigarettes, and some have as much as almost 500 cigarettes. So they're really packing it into these products. And even if there's no natural tobacco in today's nicotine products, the nicotine content of these products is concerning because nicotine itself is harmful. It's extremely addictive, especially for kids. Nicotine is one of the most addictive substances we have on Earth. It structurally and functionally changes the developing brain. It affects the parts of a brain that impact attention, learning, mood, impulse control. It's a stimulant, so it increases blood pressure, respiration, and heart rate. And because of that, it harms the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, and even reproductive systems. The effects of nicotine are more intense and longer lasting in young people than in adults. And it increases the vulnerability to other substance use and to addiction to nicotine products and to other substances. We know that many teens don't start vaping because they want to be rebellious or to spite their parents, even though some adults think that. A survey of 15 to 24-year-olds who vape found that the most endorsed reason for vaping was to cope with mental health challenges. So many teens are starting to vape because they're looking for a way to cope with negative emotions or symptoms of a mental health issue. Most youth who vape start doing so to reduce feelings of stress, anxiety, or depression, and they may continue vaping to try to cope with those feelings. So while nicotine might produce short-term positive feelings, this effect is short-lived and can worsen their mental health over time. There's also a risk of taking up cigarette smoking after someone starts vaping. This might feel counterintuitive since the tobacco companies claim that vapes were developed to help people stop smoking, but research shows that adolescents who vape have 4 times the odds of going on to start smoking compared to kids who never vape. Because once you get addicted to nicotine, the method doesn't matter so much. You're gonna use it however you possibly can. Even among younger kids who were considered low risk for smoking, so they didn't want to start smoking and they didn't have a lot of risk factors, starting to vape was associated with 9 times increased odds of smoking. And so this is because many people who vape go on to become dual users, meaning they use other types of nicotine products in addition to vaping, whether it's pouches, smoking, pipes, or any other method. 1 in 3 middle and high school students who use nicotine products use 2 or more products. It's important to mention the role that social media plays in this. Influencers on YouTube and social media glamorize vaping. They're sharing products reviews, they're discussing flavors, they're doing challenges, and these videos have hundreds of thousands of views. It's good advertising for the tobacco companies, and it rarely shows the downsides or the harms of these products. So let's switch gears and talk about marijuana. So what is marijuana? It's a green or gray mixture of dried, shredded flowers and leaves from the hemp plant, Cannabis sativa. You'll also hear marijuana called cannabis. The main active chemical is THC. Delta-9 THC is the main active chemical in marijuana. Of the roughly 400 chemicals found in the cannabis plant, Delta-9 THC is the one that affects the brain the most. CBD, you might have heard of, also comes from the same plant but is not psychoactive, so it doesn't cause a high. Marijuana can be extracted into oils and waxes and in a wide array of edible products. Over 100 different cannabinoids are found in the cannabis sativa plant. Some are found in very small amounts and can be synthesized and concentrated into new products. That would be things like Delta-8 or Delta-10, which we'll talk about more in a moment. So I'm briefly going to mention some of the other ways that young people use marijuana, but smoking marijuana is still the most common. So marijuana smoke is inhaled via joints, blunts, bongs, or even hookah pipes, though that's less common. But it's definitely vaped as well, so you can have liquids or cartridges that contain THC, again, that psychoactive high-causing component of the plant. Vaping products tend to have a much higher concentration of THC than smoked marijuana, so the effects are often stronger. The aerosol produced when the vaping liquid is inhaled contains other chemicals and ingredients, just like those nicotine vapes that I was talking about, and many of these are known to be highly toxic. We'll talk about this more later, but cannabis flower these days contains about 15 to 25% THC. Vape cartridges contain very concentrated THC, so they can have THC percentages in the high 90s. You may have also heard of dabbing. Dabbing is a waxy concentrate of marijuana, also known as hash oil, that's placed on glass or in a bong that has been heated with a blowtorch and can create an aerosol that is then inhaled. This is even more concentrated and typically more potent than smoked or vaped marijuana. Dabs can have as much as 90 up to 99% THC compared to about 15% in smoked marijuana. And then, of course, edibles. So dried cannabis or oil concentrates can be baked or infused into food and things like candy. Oils can also be ingested on their own. Edibles are not super well regulated, even when they're purchased legally, and reported THC levels can often be inaccurate. The effects of marijuana are often stronger when consumed through edibles than when smoked. It takes a lot longer to feel the effects, so people tend to overuse, especially teens. And edibles are dangerous because it's really difficult to moderate the dosage, especially if it's a homemade one. And because it can take so much longer for someone to feel the effects, it can become problematic. When marijuana is smoked, the effects are felt very quickly, like within a minute or two. When ingested, it can take much longer, and it's going to vary from person to person and day to day. It could take half an hour, or it could take 2 hours to feel anything. So what happens is kids will take what they assume is the right dose, wait an hour, decide that they aren't feeling anything, and so that they should take more. And so then they take more, and then finally it all starts to kick in, and they're way more intoxicated than they ever intended. And it can be a very scary experience. A new product on the market in the last few years are the hemp-derived THC products. You may have heard of Delta 8. So these are psychoactive substances derived from the naturally occurring cannabinoids in the cannabis marijuana plant. These are higher concentrated of these hemp-derived THC products, and they're created by a synthetic process to produce a high that's similar to the psychoactive effect of traditional Delta 9 THC marijuana. And so hemp is a type of cannabis plant that has a very low amount of Delta 9 THC occurring in it naturally. It's been legal to grow hemp for fiber or for CBD products for a while. Hemp also contains those other cannabinoids that we talked about, like Delta 8 or Delta 10 in really small amounts. So producers can grow a ton of that plant material, extract and synthesize more of the cannabinoids that they want, and then make products to sell with those cannabinoids that are technically legal even in places where marijuana is illegal, for now. So even though hemp was legal and you can't just smoke hemp to get high, these companies could use hemp to create products that will get you high. So that was a loophole for many years. So Delta 8, Delta 10, and dozens of other synthetic cannabinoids are now being made into products. And so the process to create Delta 8 and Delta 10 and all of these other synthetic cannabinoid products involves solvents and acids and hours of heat, creating potentially harmful byproducts. Delta 8 has not been evaluated or approved for use by the FDA. They have not approved it as being safe in any context. And the adverse effects are similar to high-potency Delta 9 typical THC. So though it's often marketed as diet weed or light weed, there's no evidence to support the fact that Delta 8 is any less intoxicating than the other intoxicating cannabinoids, or even typical marijuana. In 2025, 9% of high school seniors reported having used hemp-derived THC products in the past year. There was a recent effort to close the legal loophole that allowed these products to be legal and accessible. It should hopefully go into effect next year. That being said, there are strong industries who are vying to keep these products legal and accessible. But if the law stays, these hemp-derived intoxicating products should be illegal sometime in 2027. So let's discuss the prevalence and the trends that we are seeing. Here are rates of youth marijuana use in 2025. We have 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders. So first, when it comes to lifetime use of marijuana, you can see that a little less than 35% of 12th graders, 22% of 10th graders, and 12.5% of 8th graders say they've ever tried marijuana in their life. For past year use, just over a quarter of high school seniors say that they've used marijuana in the past year. Just over 17% of high school seniors say that they've used marijuana in the past month. And a little over 11% say that they've vaped marijuana in the past month. The numbers are much lower, obviously, for 10th and 8th graders. Another concerning trend is the rising THC potency in marijuana products. So if you remember, THC is the part of the cannabis plant that gets you high. Every year, the potency of marijuana products is significantly stronger, with higher and higher doses of THC, that psychoactive and addictive component in the cannabis plant. THC potency has increased steadily over the past 25 years, nearly quadrupling, while the CBD component, the part that doesn't get you high, remains steady or has even declined in the past 25 years. And this is important because the higher THC concentrations are associated with worse outcomes when it comes to marijuana. So it's associated with a higher likelihood of developing psychosis, anxiety, suicidality, and addiction to cannabis, as well as ER visits. The rising THC means that kids get more high, and they often present in the ER with panic attacks and paranoia, racing heart, all of those things of being too high. And unfortunately, these products are being marketed to youth. Nicotine and marijuana devices are colorful, they come in a broad range of flavors, and they're promoted by celebrities and social media influencers. We know that marijuana edibles often mimic popular candy, like you can see in the pictures here. They are often made to look like snacks, and some are put in beverage products. They're discreet, they lack that distinct marijuana smell, they're usually pretty easy to hide, and so all of these features make these products seem safer and less harmful than they are. So why are we concerned about youth using marijuana? There's a lot of short-term effects from using marijuana, definitely altered perception, so being high, increased appetite, difficulty with thinking and problem solving, disrupted learning and memory, poor motor coordination, increased heart rate, anxiety, paranoia, and unfortunately, unpredictable effects. This last part is what makes marijuana hard to talk about with young people. Two teenagers could take the same size hit off of a joint and have vastly different reactions. One teen may become calm and relaxed, while the other may panic with a racing heart and paranoia. There's no way to predict how your mind or body is going to react to THC if you haven't used it before. So it can produce similar effects to a depressant or a stimulant or a hallucinogen, depending on the dose and individual differences in physiology. And the effects can really be amplified and more dangerous when someone's combining marijuana with other substances, including alcohol. So marijuana can magnify the effects of anxiety and depression. It can lead to panic attacks and major shifts in mood. Schizophrenia and psychosis are commonly linked to prolonged marijuana use in people who might be genetically predisposed to those disorders. There's a study in 11 sites across Europe that found that people who regularly consumed marijuana with at least 10% THC, which is basically all of marijuana today, they were nearly 5 times as likely to develop a psychotic disorder as those who had never used marijuana. Similar studies in Canada found that the risk of developing a psychotic disorder was 11 times as high for teenage marijuana users compared to non-users. And another study in Denmark estimated that as many as 30% of cases of schizophrenia among men ages 21 to 30 could be attributed to cannabis use disorder. So the risks are really serious. We also know that chronic use can lead to diminished ability to carry out long-term plans, can lead to apathy, decreased attention to appearance and behavior, and decreased ability to concentrate and sustain attention, all of which can lead to poor performances in school and in work. We also know that research shows that young people who use marijuana relative to those who don't have higher odds of depression, anxiety, suicidality, and suicide attempts. Another study in 2024 focused on adolescent and young adult marijuana use and academic performance and found that those who used marijuana had reduced academic performance and grades. They were less likely to graduate high school. They were twice as likely to have absenteeism and twice higher risk of being a dropout. They had lower college enrollment and lower degree attainment. There's also a common misconception that people can't become addicted to marijuana. We do know that those who use it chronically and intensely can develop both physical tolerance to the drug, where they have to use more and more of it to get the same effect, and psychological dependence, where they have withdrawal symptoms when they try to stop, which are common facets of addiction. In 2024, just under 5% of adolescents and almost 16% of young adults had a past year marijuana use disorder. So that means they were diagnosed with a marijuana addiction. We also know that the age of onset matters. People who begin using marijuana before age 18 are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop a marijuana use disorder compared to those who start using in adulthood. And that's what this graph here is showing us. And so this is why it's so important to delay the use of cannabis for as long as possible. We may not be able to get people to abstain for their whole entire lives, but if we get them to wait until they're an adult to start using, the risk for all of these negative outcomes is much lower. So how do we keep young people safe with these products on the market? A big part is understanding why people are using these things. Kids' behaviors, though it may not seem like it, make sense. Behaviors happen for a reason, so we want to uncover the why. We know that young people are using substances because of social pressure or curiosity, to cope with stress or anxiety or depression, and so we want to ask why they're using it or why they might consider it. So then we can discuss other healthier ways of meeting those needs and managing those feelings. We also want to challenge the perceptions of what is normal. Many young people and parents overestimate the number of young people who are using substances, which increases the risk of using. We know in reality the majority of young people are not using substances, including vaping and marijuana. And so for both nicotine and marijuana, there are many reasons to not use. So leverage the reasons that are going to be the most important and relevant to your child. Maybe it's academic success. They want to be good at school, and so explain the importance of avoiding use of these products for as long as possible to allow their brains to fully develop. Maybe they want to be financially independent, so highlight the high costs of substance use. Getting addicted to nicotine is very expensive. Maybe they're concerned about their mental health, so we want to discuss the increased risks of stress, anxiety, irritability, and psychosis. Maybe they want to have an anti-corporate mentality. Maybe they want to stick it to the man, and so we want to explain the role of big business, including celebrity endorsements, and these huge industries that are compromising youth health for profit. Maybe they're really athletically driven, and so we can explain how vaping is going to interfere with their respiratory health and their cardiac health and their stamina, and how their performance is going to be worse. Maybe they want to be independent and they want to be a nonconformist, and so we can show how being addicted to substances is going to interfere with their ability to be independent and is a form of conformity. Maybe they're really eco-conscious and they're worried about the environment, so we can explain the environmental damage of these vaping devices. You can see hundreds of thousands of plastic vapes in landfills. And so leverage what's going to be most important to your child. If a young person is using substances like these, we want to help them. Don't only punish them. We want to focus on health and safety, not punishment. Addiction is really serious, but many young people do not get the help that they need. We need to remember that when it comes to vaping and marijuana, the villains are not our teenagers. The villains are the industries that are marketing and pushing these products to youth in order to get them addicted. If you've ever met anyone who is trying to quit cigarette smoking, you know that it's not easy. It can be very difficult for young people to stop. That's why we can't just punish them and hope that things are going to change. Many young people don't get the help that they need when it comes to nicotine and marijuana products. There are many proven therapies that can work for smoking and vaping cessation, and many quit programs exist specifically to help young people who are struggling to stop vaping. I'll share some of these at the end. And so let's go through some frequently asked questions by parents and caregivers. Some parents might say, how do I respond if my child is resistant to conversations about marijuana use? What if they say, but it's legal in some states. Why would they make something legal that could hurt me? So you could say, let's look at alcohol. It's legal, but it causes damage, including car crashes, aggression, and other dangerous behavior. We know that alcohol can cause major physical and mental health problems. Cigarettes are also legal, even though they're highly addictive, proven to cause birth defects and cancer, and cigarettes are the leading cause of preventable death in this country. Just because something's legal and regulated doesn't make it safe and doesn't mean it's not harmful. We can also remind kids that things become legal often not because they're safe, but because people can make a lot of money that way. These big industries want you to try their products and get addicted and make you a customer for life. Other parents might say, what do I do if my child's not responsive to having conversations about vaping or other nicotine products? You might find it hard to get your teen to start talking. You can ask questions about their friends or their classmates. It might be easier for them to open up about someone else other than themselves. So this can lead them to sharing their thoughts with you. We want to keep conversations casual, curious, and consistent. If they don't want to talk right now, remind them that you're there for them when they have things on their mind. It's a tip we've shared before, but you can use times like seeing someone smoking in a TV show or walking past a new vape shop as a way to organically bring up the topic in conversation. If you're talking about it often, not just once you've suspected that a child might be using, it's going to feel more comfortable for everyone. How do I respond if my child says, would you rather I smoke cigarettes than vape? Reminding your teen that you care deeply about their health and well-being and expressing genuine curiosity about their thought process might help them to open up. So you could say something like, honestly, I don't want you to be doing anything that could harm you. So whether that's using marijuana, cigarettes, alcohol, or behaving recklessly. I'm interested in knowing more about why you might think that vaping is safer than smoking cigarettes. And then once you listen to what they say, you can share accurate information about the harms of vaping and nicotine products. So now I want to share some resources from both local organizations and national organizations. YSS prepares kids to make good choices through school and community programming. Their prevention specialists are hard at work in your community, teaching young people the information they need to know and sharing helpful resources. Visit yss.org for more. For people who are looking for help quitting nicotine products, whether it's cigarettes or vaping, Iowa has their own quit line. So visit quitlineiowa.org to see the resources they offer for free. The X program is an evidence-based program to help quit vaping, smoking, or any other tobacco product. It's developed by the Truth Initiative and the Mayo Clinic. It's free and available to anyone ages 13 and over. They offer 24/7 support, and it's been shown to increase the odds of quitting by 40%. So you can find that at xprogram.com. From Partnership to End Addiction, my organization, we have a lot of free resources. One of them is the Prevention Checkup, which is a short survey that you can take to try to get a snapshot of your child's risk and protective factors. It's a quick survey that you take on drugfree.org. You'll get expert tips to lower risk and build resilience. Your answers are confidential, and you'll get links to tailored resources. We also have a lot of help and support for people who are concerned about a loved one's substance use. We have a helpline, online support groups, personalized text messaging programs, and self-paced trainings for parents. We also have a lot of resources about specific substances. So we have a whole marijuana resource center that you can access using this QR code here or finding it on drugfree.org. We have a lot of resources for free on marijuana, vaping, nicotine, anything you would want to know more about. From your friends at YSS and Partnership to End Addiction, thank you so much for watching this webinar.